All right. Hello there, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Poe and I want to take some time here and really demonstrate what is going to be pretty fun, we think. What we are demonstrating is a two-paired choice preference assessment. And what we're using as our choices are some items that are off the beaten path. And what those items are will be, the first item is going to be nori seaweed. The second item is basil. And the third item is rosemary. So we are really wanting to observe and test some preferences for what we think will be more olfactory-based interactions. We may also get Poe sampling some, putting her nose right up in it, or maybe getting even a little, in her mouth there. But these are all safe herbs in moderation. And obviously when you're preference assessing anything, any item or object there, whether it's a type of food or certain herb or really a toy, just make sure that safety is of paramount importance, and also that you're consulting with a veterinary professional as need be to go about such things. So with that said, we're only using 3 items this time. So again, with the 2-pair preference assessments, we're presenting 2 items at once, about a foot in front of Poe and about 6 inches apart from one another. So right in kind of the front of her here, just kind of wipe that off. Although we'll be presenting the items there in little petri dishes, much like last time in the other video. We have petri dishes and we remove the herbs out of there with plastic tweezers or pliers that we just got in bulk. So that is a consideration we took, because in terms of touching it with our hands, we didn't want to mingle the scent of our hands and then the scent of the items individually with one another. So those were the considerations using a petri dish. You can see Poe staring up here, so I'm going to try to talk quickly so she can stay there, and we'll try to explore off the beaten path before we get started. But with that said, we have them in petri dishes all ready to present, so we'll place them down about a foot in front of Poe, about 6 inches separated from one another at an equal distance. So the presentation should be as symmetrical and uniform as we can make it, so that one side is not calling Poe's name because it's closer or further, or that will not be an association, that it's just going to be a universal presentation in terms of that symmetry that we're looking to do. And following that thought, maybe Poe, we're seeing, is preferring to always go to the left. Well, then we are with the preference assessment. We will present those items both on the right and the left. So presenting the 3 individual items in as many pairs as runs out all possible combinations, with each being presented on each side. In this case, there are those 6 pairs, and with what we have done with that is kind of randomly picked as individually as we could. We listed the pairs and kind of just blindfoldedly picked, so that we didn't just have, A, B, A, C, B, A, B, C, C, A, C, B, and or some other pattern that just sort of is maybe more in line with just sort of our own associations and conditioning history. So trying to generate that in a random way as well, without using something like a random generator. But I think I've blabbed enough. Poe's definitely ready. She's like, let's get this started. So this will be interesting. It's always interesting when we're preference assessing non-food items. You see we're using the station, and it will be interesting to see Poe's interaction and engagement with these olfactory items as opposed to the usual gustatory items there. So, all right, without further ado, we will get started here. And I'm just going to get my bearings because I'm using Poe's right and left and not mine. So we will go about getting those in our hand. All right. Now, the first one will be the seaweed on Poe's left and the basil on her right. And I'm going to try to present and move. And it's what she goes to first. So we'll give about 3 seconds of interaction, and we'll remove the other before she really can sniff them both. Now, I could have presented that a little more symmetrical, and I'm going to circle in this one the seaweed. What I may do is move to the other side here. This next pairing is going to be rosemary on pose right, and the basil on her left. And I'm just adjusting to her body. Hopefully I'm just going to look in the camera. Perfect. Try to present these down as much as I can right in front of her. Interesting. So going to the rosemary. And again, I'm going to give her about 2 or 3 seconds with it, and then I want to pick up. I don't want her to really go to sniff the basil and sniff everything. I want to really let just the presentation dictate the course and not let it linger too long. All right, perfect. So she returns. Now the next one, we have the seaweed again on pose right and the basil on her left. So similar to the first presentation when she went for the seaweed, we'll see on the seaweed on the left. We'll see what happens this time. So a little more time. If she hadn't interacted, I would have picked up and we would have just kept going. I am going to indicate the seaweed because there was that tactile interaction with it. She reached out, touched it. So there was some semblance of interaction. We're getting data in this collection here. Shake it off, Poe, right? All right, so this time we're going to do rosemary and seaweed. Now the rosemary will be on pose right. Seaweed will be on her left. All right, so that rosemary having interest to the nose there, and she goes back to station. Now this next presentation will be basil on her right and rosemary on her left. What do you think? Nice. All right. We will get ready, and when she resets, we'll present. We have 2 more pairings, Popey. All right, she's ready. And I'm just curious to see we'll give the basil that one. I kind of put it down again just to see. Now 1 more pairing, and that will be the seaweed and the rosemary. So with this preference assessment, what we are getting, even though if it's not looking like she's chomping at the bit, we're getting data and we're getting indicators of what we can possibly use and pursue more of. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. Yes. I'm going back to that rosemary. And I'm going to remove this. Now, looking back at our data, excellent job, Poppy. Looking back at the data, give her a treat there, which she's, you know, the primaries are always the best there sometimes in terms of what we're really waiting for. Now, in terms of the data, I'm looking at this and we're reflecting, and I want to show you some more with the reinforcers in a minute. But so we have 1, 2, A 2 times, C, whoops, getting out of order. I'll let you know C in a minute. We have B 1 time. And C 3 times. So just as a refresher, A is seaweed, B was the basil, which really wasn't a hit, and, well, I should qualify that, and C was the rosemary. Now, in my mind, I wonder how much of it's the actual presentation, meaning if the basil was in the clipped version from the garden, it might be different, but from what I have gauged with this, I can hone in on the rosemary, and there does seem to be an interest in terms of pose engagement with that. So the fact that I am able to lead her around with this and sit, get her to give the, excuse me, my throat's dry here, give the cue and have her respond. High five. Yeah. And then have the basil be that object of reinforcement in terms of her focusing on it. And I can let her interact with it in a way too and just kind of see. So that is something to consider in our approach. Now with all herbs, we're considering if there's chewing on it and like that, how much consumption we want, because some herbs definitely can make the stomach upset, even if they're good in certain roughage forms and stuff, and obviously everything in moderation. And again, please consult with the veterinarian in terms of any items you're using. But I can already kind of see from how that rosemary is going to be, and I think I might have misspoken and called this basil by accident, but how this rosemary is really captivating and capturing Poe's interest. And I think some of that is the presentation of it in terms of how it's stocky. And I think it's also the smell of it, that redolent smell that drew Poe right in. And I do have, these are nice and fresh. So at the same time, I can readily smell the basil and kind of the peppery, well, the sweetness in there, the sweet little spice in there. It's got a little zest to it too. But I just can tell that though Poe is, some sniffs there now, she's a little more interested that it's down. It doesn't have that captivation or that really interest to explore or have that seeking, nature engaged by this form of basil as much as by the rosemary. Again, if the basil were maybe in a stocky form out of the garden, maybe different. Now, the other thing I noted was the seaweed, and I wonder if in a different presentation, because the preference assessment is really just honing in and seeing which of those items on their own without manipulations in terms of my own manufacturings, in terms of doing something like this with the seaweed. But I do wonder in terms of the seaweed if this may be an object of reinforcement. And at times I will use not full play where we're necessarily taking a toy and throwing that here or there depending on what we're working on, but certainly something kind of just running here or letting Poe engage and kind of try to go for the bite. So I wonder if seaweed is something that we can play around with a little more as well. I shouldn't have taken that bite away from her, should let her have it to try it. So keep those thoughts in mind. And sometimes it's how we present the item, how we use them, how we let them interact with the environment, because I have a feeling if just some ridiculousness like that, and you're getting about 3 throws in there on average. Now, all intents and purposes, for all intents and purposes, your Poe, I always say for all intensive purposes, that's the healthcare in me. For all intents and purposes, as we can see that Snoop, yeah, Poe is readily engaging and offering behavior. And then this is all I am backing that up with by tossing this in the air 3 times. High five. Yeah. Not very high energy, we're just lying here, but we're getting behavior. Snoop, yeah. And pretty quick, and stuff that we can build off. So keep that in mind. What I am going to do is transition in a second. I don't have any treats on me I would toss off to try to get station out from under Poe so we can kind of start picking our session up here and gracefully, gradually adjust to our next part of our night routines here. But I just wanted to review that and kind of go over the data there. So again, the seaweed 2 times, the basil 1 time, and the rosemary 3 times. And that was 6 in total. So rosemary 50% of those times, the seaweed 2 out of 6, and the basil 1 out of 6. So some things to consider. And again, if we tested with these same items, same time tomorrow night, different time tomorrow or another day, we might get very different results. So that's also that history-informed approach to preference assessments that we have spoken to in the presentation, and that there is a really good article out there, I believe, I might be misquoting it. I feel like I should grab my phone, so I'm not even going to say it. But I do have the link in the actual presentation with that history-based model. So I hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it and saw how preference assessment testing does not just have to be dependent on, on food or cuteness, but that we can try other objects. My gosh, I could just try 4 different weird-looking, colorful pens and do something like that and just see, you know, in front of Poe. But again, what objects are we having interest in? And then how do we manufacture motion or engagement with those objects to keep up their reinforcing effectiveness in maybe even more creative ways? So thank you for watching. I hope this was fun and functional. And Poe, are we out? We're out. Let me grab a treat and I will really be out, right, Poe? Come on. Yeah.